Hi, everyone. My name is Phil Blancato, CEO and President of Latimer Thalman Asset Management, Chief Market Strategist for Osaic. Welcome to another weekly Market Impact. I am very excited this week because it's Friday. You know, I usually record on Monday, but the reason why I'm recording on Friday is for two fun reasons. One, I have a guest I have already talked to you about. I'll get to give my guest in a second. Dr. Hickerson is going to join me. I'll let him tell you about himself, but it's super exciting. And two, I'm going to Hawaii on Sunday. So, as many of you know, I speak around the country, sometimes around the world about economics, and I've been invited to go to Hawaii. Makes it fun is my wife, who normally doesn't come to work events because I'm working, but she has no problem hanging out at the pool with her two daughters are both coming. So Luca, my graduate, is going to be coming as a graduation gift. And then Marcella is going to come as well, who will be studying for her MCATs by sitting by the pool. Not a bad thing. And then to make it even more fun, my next podcast will be with my daughter Luca to talk about her college experience in economics and what she's going to do for a career. But we're going to do that from Japan. Never been to Japan. So it's very exciting for me. I can't wait to go see. I'm going to do 6 days over there and see a couple Kyoto, Tokyo, Okinawa, just to get an idea of a country I've always wanted to see. So very excited. For those of you who know, how much this time of year means to me to leave the New Jersey area when the Jersey Shore is getting fun again. It's tough, but I'm looking forward to doing something fun. Memorial Day weekend, I mentioned it last week, was a very exciting weekend around here. There's a lot of celebrations for the Memorial Day. My dad, a great story about my father, who came from Sicily at 17, was because my dad's dad died when he was 2, because his dad died in the United States. My father became an American citizen at that time in 1956, almost immediately. Well, then he got drafted. And so the funny story goes, he was in the military for only 6 months. But when he came to the United States, he was about 5'6", 5'7". When he left the military, he was nearly 6 foot because he got 3 square meals a day in the American military. And we're in Sicily, they were starving. That's why he came to the United States. So my dad was a very proud American, very proud vet for the little time he served. He was willing to stay longer. They didn't need him. He did set the course record at Fort Dix for the 50-yard dash. I'm sure it's been shattered many times, but for a little Sicilian guy, he was quite fast. So Memorial Day was a very special holiday for all of us, and I got a chance to spend a couple of days at the Jersey Shore. And then I took my long ride up to Pennsylvania, my dad's country place, God rest his soul, where I was hanging out with family and made a big campfire and maybe had a glass of bourbon or two. I don't know if that's true or not. That's just a rumor. Sitting by the campfire with my cousins and catching up on old times. That was my weekend. I only talk about my weekend. I normally give you my weekend updates, but there's a lot going on right now. So my next broadcast will be from Hawaii. And then Luca will join me in Japan. It's a lot going on. But more importantly, today I am overjoyed by something that we always talk about investments. Every week it's always about markets. And in fact, I didn't even talk about stock market as of today, all-time high, Dow Jones, all-time high, NASDAQ, all-time high. And my favorite, not only just emerging markets at near an all-time high, but small cap stocks at an all-time high. Why all this euphoria? Well, it's pretty simple. The war seems to be potentially ending. I mean, it depends on the minute, but as of now, there's a draft agreement. Whether it checks all boxes or just delays things, we'll see. But it seems like there's a reason. And what you saw was the immediate reaction in oil, and that oil cascading down about 20% from the highs now. And even the bond market with the 10-year U.S. Treasury hitting 4.65, now down to 4.4 as of today. That move down reflects a much more calmer environment. And what we need is, because we're kind of like in this spillover moment, if oil stayed higher, this high or even potentially higher for longer, there's a chance that if we don't get the reserves globally back online soon, you could see oil spike significantly higher, 150, 160 a barrel, because of the supplies, the excess reserves are being wound down, and the Strait being so locked down. It could get a heck of a lot worse here in the next 30 days. So that had the market being a bit spooked. And then just the calming effect of it, or having oil come back through. There's 150 million barrels sitting on tankers near the Strait of Hormuz, ready to go through right now. It has a profound impact on it. The reason why the market is actually looking pretty rosy is because if we don't have this really terrible moment of inflation, or more inflation than we have right now, Costco sold more gasoline on the holiday weekend, Memorial Day weekend, than they ever had at any Memorial Day weekend or any weekend ever. Why? They're a discount gasoline wholesaler. So people are being very smart about where they're buying their gasoline. The point is, we're at an inflection point. And it seems like that this idea of inflation in a really terrible moment might wane, and that's why markets are running hot, not just the equity market, but the bond market. It's a little bit what we thought this year would be, a really broad market, and that's what's happening right now. So markets are great. We don't have to spend any more time than that. The data came out. We saw PCE come out. It's a very important indicator to me. That number basically was what we expected. Hotter than we like, but hotter because of oil, not hotter because of traditional inflationary aspects. So really nothing too scary there. It was what we expected. That's it for that. Now today. Dr. Kevin Hickerson, Dr. Kevin Peter Hickerson is the guy I saw, and I've told you about him. I was at an event with Capital Group out in California, and honestly, I was just left so impressed with what his thoughts are on power, specifically nuclear. And I just think for a moment that I grew up, I'm 58 years old. I grew up with 3 Mile Island and all the anti-nuclear rhetoric and Chernobyl and things that shifted the narrative around what power could be to where it can be now. And Kevin opened my eyes to things I've never even heard of before. So not only does it have an exciting company with some really exciting news, he's going to talk to us about power and nuclear specifically. But before we do that, Kevin, first introduce yourself. Tell us a little about who you are, where you live, and how you became such a smart guy.
Thanks for having me, Phil. I'm really excited about this. Yeah, I'm Dr. Kevin Peter Hickerson, and I have a degree in nuclear physics from Caltech, and I work on both um, classical fundamental physics, but also on energy. And I've worked with many startups in the renewable space, particularly solar. When I worked at Idea Lab for Bill Gross, helped him start a lot of great companies there. But I got very excited about nuclear. Now, obviously, I'm biased because I'm a nuclear physicist, but part of it is because of my experience in seeing how other energy systems work. I realized that nuclear just had all the right answers. We have advanced nuclear now, which means that we can make nuclear significantly safer than it already was. And nuclear was very safe before, but we want to avoid even things like 3 Mile Island in the future. And we have ways of doing that really well. And I think more importantly, as we move forward, if we really want more power, not just keeping the lights on, if we want to expand and use things like, start powering data centers and reindustrialization of the United States and the world, we need energy to power that. And nuclear uses the least resources from the earth as possible, more than anything else. Even with things like solar and wind that are typically marketed as green and good for the environment, the fact is they still use land, and land is not an infinite resource. As I'm sure your listeners know, who know a lot about investing,
Yeah.
land keeps going up in value for a reason, which is that as more and more people want more and more land, we're not printing more of that. We're not manufacturing land. So land and mining resources need to be kept to a minimum because we're trying to grow as fast as possible. If you want to grow as fast as possible, you need to use what you have as efficiently as possible, and nuclear does that the best. And because of modern technology like computer modeling and AI design and all kinds of things like that, we're able to build nuclear reactors smaller, cheaper, mass produced, better than we ever have before. We get to take all the knowledge that we learned from the last 70 years of running nuclear power sort of in the old style straight out of World War II. We ramped up really quickly, but we've learned a lot since then, and we build things differently. And we can take all the things that we've seen in manufacturing that have improved also over the last 70 years and apply that to nuclear and make it significantly cheaper, safer, better, and more abundant. And I'm really excited about that because I'm a big fan of growth. So I think we need something to
Look at
power
your
that growth.
passion. Look
Yeah,
how excited you are. I mean, I love that. I
oh, I
mean,
love
that,
it.
it's infectious. To your credit. Well, first off, how did we got to go backwards and go forwards. You already, yeah, there's 1,000 questions you gave me already, but I'll start with just something simple. Where are you from? Are you a California kid, born and raised?
Yeah, I was born in New Jersey, but I grew up in California, in
I knew you
outside
see
Los Angeles, in
my pillow
Claremont.
back there. Yeah, so I'm a New Jersey guy. So I knew there's something about you I like besides how smart you are. I see that's helpful.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that. And Caltech, obviously a great school. Uh, how did someone fall into that? How do you decide one day I want to be a nuclear scientist and a power scientist? Energy.
I knew I wanted to be a physicist since age 5. So I have
Wow.
always loved physics. I always wanted to understand how the universe worked. I remember I have this really vivid memory of when I was 5, the first time I started thinking about infinity. I was thinking of infinity of scale. In my head, I was just imagining zooming out and wondering, things getting smaller and smaller, like the planets of the galaxy getting smaller. And it made me wonder: are there giants out there watching us, or is there another universe that we're inside of? Are we just an atom in a bigger universe? And it was a big emotional event, but it made me wake up and realize I really needed to understand what was going on as much as possible. And I didn't know I wanted to be a nuclear physicist until I was a little bit older. And that was actually when I went back to grad school. And that was because my advisor came and he said he reviewed my application. When you go into grad school, sometimes you have advisors who come and they basically try and market themselves, like, "Hey, join my group." They look
Yeah.
at the applicants and they say, "Join my group." So I had a few advisors suggest that I join their group, and he told me about something I had never heard of before, which were called ultra cold neutrons. These are neutrons that are freed from a nucleus. Just same thing that happens in nuclear power. You free neutrons from a nucleus, and that creates a chain reaction. However, if you do it right, you can freeze the neutrons. And this was like as almost a big of a moment for me as when I was 5, thinking about infinity. Because I just neutrons are these things that just they're neutral, so they don't have electric charge, so they just fly through everything. That's one of the ways a nuclear reactor works. That's how uh, things like that happen. And the idea that you could take this thing that you could barely capture, but you could freeze it, was really amazing. And one of the great things you could do with it, once you freeze it, you can trap it. You can trap it in a magnetic bottle or a physical bottle, or even by gravity. They're so cold. That's why they're called ultra cold. They bounce only a few meters off the ground. It's roughly
God.
roughly the velocity a basketball has when you see a basketball game. So they kind of dribble on the ground. So you could do things like put a magnetic bottle on the bottom and then trap them by gravity on top. And this was just like so magical to me. I was like, okay, actually, I want to be a nuclear physicist.
That's pretty cool.
And he also told me about all the science that you can do with these giant colliders you hear about in Switzerland, like the Large Hadron
Yeah.
Collider at
Yeah.
CERN. You can do all of those same experiments with ultra cold neutrons, because the neutron is one of the few particles that participates in all four of nature's forces: gravity, the weak force, strong force, and electromagnetism. And so it's like a little test bed that allows you to access all things about the laws of physics with as soon as you trap them, you can do all kinds of experiments on it. And I was hooked. And I was like, okay, I want to be a nuclear physicist. I don't want to be a string theorist. I don't want to be a condensed matter guy. I don't want to be a high energy guy. I want to be a nuclear physicist.
Lucky for us, you are, because you're doing some pretty cool things. So 70 years ago, nuclear stuff began to proliferate everywhere. Right now, we have nuclear submarines. We've had things on the way, the fits and starts. I read a piece that nuclear subs can go 50 years without refueling, which is pretty
That's right.
amazing.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, we don't, we haven't built a new nuclear power plant other than the one in Georgia, which was 7 billion over cost, if I'm not mistaken, and 10 years behind schedule. And I know those folks who run it, and they're excited they finally have it, but it was ridiculously difficult. Are we
Yeah.
finally on a renaissance? And what's different now about nuclear?
Yeah, we are definitely having a nuclear renaissance, and the lessons we're learning from like the Vogel plant that you mentioned that went over budget, that took a long time. That's actually the lesson we're learning. It's not that the nuclear technology needed to be improved or something like that. I mean, there are improvements, but that wasn't the block. It wasn't even political opposition to nuclear, although that's a common belief that people have. They think, oh, people just don't like nuclear, therefore we have it. Really, the big problem was that as long as we were doing nuclear at a really large scale, the gigawatt scale, meaning 1.5 megawatts per reactor, or gigawatts per reactor, these giant things with these huge cooling towers, it meant that we had to build it near a city and near a grid, and we could only build one per city. And that's like just not fitting the market. I mean, the market, it has more than just cities. In fact, one of the things that happened in the U.S. is one of the problems we ran into was that we succeeded too well in the 50s and 60s, and the best spots for nuclear of that scale are all taken by nuclear reactors.
Oh my
They're
gosh.
already taken. So there are not that many slots left. And if you're trying to sell, if you're trying to sell airplanes to, United or something, they're only going to buy so many. There's only so many passengers or something. That's because that's the scale of an airline. Um, and if you want to sell more things, like you can't go and say, knock on doors and tell everyone who owns a car, hey, buy a 787, buy one of these, because that doesn't fit that market. There's way more people selling cars to those people. A car is different than an airplane. It's the same with nuclear. We realize what we really need to do is copy the, copy the IKEA model of selling things rather than it always having to be like the California high speed rail or the Boston big dig model, these mega projects.
Yeah.
Because when you have a mega project, you have this really key weakness, which is that if the project gets stalled for any reason, political reasons, economic reasons, whatever it is that stalls it, you can't just pick up and go build another one because you're only building that one site, that one mega project. And
You're
that's what
stuck having to
Vogtle was.
fix it
It
and
was like a
fix it,
mega
move it.
project. Yeah. So what we need to do is we need to build things more like IKEA furniture, in a factory that where smaller reactors can be delivered by truck and installed on sites that are smaller. And
Now think
that's
of that, everybody. Hang on, I gotta stop you there. A
yeah,
truck that's the size of a new, you can go on a truck rather
ex-
than these gigantic plants. So maybe
exactly.
explain what a modular nuclear reactor is
Yeah.
and where
The
about
key
where we're going to use it first. Where is it? Data centers? Where do you think the first impact is? But sorry, go ahead.
the key is this new approach called small modular reactors, a term coined by Steve Koonin in the early 2000s. Um, and small modular reactors are it really, the fact that they can fit on a truck is the most defining feature of it. Technically, it just means 300 megawatts or smaller, but in practice, what it means is a thing that can be built at one place, tested and assembled, but not turned on, and then delivered empty without fuel. So it's just the parts. It's not the stuff that goes in it. So you don't run it on a truck. You just transport it on site, and that means that you can deliver it to any of the sites. So if one site gets stalled, the project gets delayed, that's fine. You just drive the truck to the other customer who's also going. And you ask, what are they going to be used for? Data centers is definitely one of the big hot items right now. That's where the big demand is. But there's a lot more to that. There's mining, there's military bases, there's remote communities that really are paying through the nose for electricity right now. If you have a remote community that, let's say, has 100,000 people, but they're in some part of Alaska where they only can get their energy from diesel generators. That's pretty expensive. Diesel is a pretty expensive way to make electricity.
Yeah.
And also, there's always if there's weather or something like that involved, there's the risk that diesel can't get through. So those are the places that are going to want these small modular reactors first. But it also is a way of going to even smaller cities. And rather than saying, okay, we need another giant nuclear plant each time you want to upgrade, you can upgrade by these small modular reactors in little chunks, smaller chunks that's appropriate for that market size.
How big are they? And when you say smaller, if frame it up? If it's on a truck, is it bigger than a bread box and smaller than a
Oh
nuclear?
yeah. So when I say bigger that it can fit on a truck, I definitely don't mean like a flatbed pickup truck like mine. I'm talking about these, these wide load transports where it fits on an 18 wheeler, a specialized 18 wheeler. But it can go on American roads and get to the
Yeah,
spot.
I
Now
remember
it
you
depends on the
describing.
size. Some companies are making what are called micro reactors, and those sometimes are small enough to fit in a shipping container. And a great company, Radiant, is an example of one of those. They're making one that fits in a shipping container here in LA. Also, they are making reactors for military bases at first. So, and that's because the military won't buy something unless it fits in a shipping container. I don't know if you have any
Well, I mean,
military listeners. Know they'll back me up on this one.
think about if you could put it on a ship and send power anywhere in the world in a moment's notice. How long does it
Exactly.
take it to turn them on? So you get there. Now the fuel, I can't wait to talk about the fuel because I was pretty excited about what you told me about the fuel. We'll get to that in a second. But let's say you fuel them up. You bring the pieces. You put it. How long does it take to put it together and turn it on, give or take?
Well, that depends on the startup, honestly. So it can still take a long time. One of the big problems with nuclear compared to things like gas generators, I'll admit this, I'll confess this, is that gas generators can generally be set up faster, and that has also hurt nuclear in the past because it usually takes a year or two to set up because of really licensing and regulatory limits. That limits how fast you're even allowed to set it up. So it's not that the time for the equipment and things like that. If you're somewhere off a military base, if you're trying to power a data center or something, you do have to get regulatory approval. But that's also one of the things that's changing about the nuclear renaissance is that there are new parts to the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Committee's Commission's rules, and the NRC is making updates to make small modular reactors faster and more appropriate to new companies coming up with a little bit more exotic designs. And it really, in the past, only one type of nuclear reactor was allowed because there were no competitors for that. So there was no
Yeah.
need for other regulation. Now there is. And the regulations are being updated to make it a little bit easier for companies to set up a reactor faster because the fact is people don't necessarily want to wait 5 years, definitely don't want to wait 10 years for a reactor. If you're setting up something like a data center, you need that to happen in the 3-year time frame. And
Well,
so
to your point, I mean, look at the revolt around data centers and the worry about water and the worry about power. So
yeah,
if you have a
yeah,
modular nuclear reactor, as I understand, you need a lot less water because you have plenty of power to cool it. You can just do it the traditional way, and the power is singular right there, and it doesn't affect the grid or the people who live near there. Is
that's
that
right.
safe?
Right.
So you said something that was extremely provocative. One of the things I grew up with was the strip mining for uranium, that the negatives, the sites that would be radioactive, or the Chernobyls where they didn't properly protect the dome, and obviously had an accident where at least in the United States we do, but still, while 3 Mile Island was never an accident, it potentially became one. Well, by the way, mind-boggling that they're turning it back on because we need power instead of coming to you. But okay, that's fine. Well, tell us a little bit about the fuel, where it comes from, and why. And you said something that was shocking to me, that it's safe. Yeah, you can't have a nuclear accident with the new type of fuel, the porcelain
Yeah,
style.
that's right. A lot of nuclear reactors, including my company and Radiant and several others, are using a new type of fuel called TRISO fuel. And TRISO isn't new in that it's using something other than uranium. It's still using enriched uranium. It's a uranium enriched usually to about 20% at the most. Um, and that's higher enrichment than traditional. And when you use higher enrichment, you use the fuel more, you use the uranium much more efficiently. It costs a little bit more to get that enrichment, but uranium is very cheap. And so getting to that enrichment level is a more efficient way to use it. Um, TRISO also it's encased in a little silicon carbide shell. That's the really big new feature about it because that shell means that the reactor can't melt down, meaning you can design a reactor so that even if you lose all cooling, it can still just sit there. It'll still get hot, but it won't melt. And we all know the term meltdown. Meltdowns are what is the big Achilles heel of past nuclear.
Right.
If a reactor melts down, it means everything in it melts. The metal melts, the fuel melts, and it all mixes together, and it's extremely impossible to deal with. This is still true of Fukushima. This is true of Chernobyl. There's not much you can do about it. So getting rid of the risk of meltdown is really important. But TRISO doesn't stop there. It doesn't just remove the risk of meltdown. It also, this silicon carbide shell acts like a little tiny containment vessel, just like the outside big concrete dome. Even before it gets to that point, it's inside of a tiny ceramic shell that doesn't allow any fission products to be released from the shell, even as the reactor uses the fuel. That means that if even the worst case scenario happened, let's say it's hit by a missile, God forbid, or a meteor, or there's some kind of event that we just can't predict, the material it'll be mechanically spread over the area, but it won't go into the atmosphere. It won't create these big exclusion zones. And so I think those two improvements are really important. Those are the two I'm most excited about. I love TRISO, and the military, by the way, is only considering TRISO because to them, being attacked by a missile is not some theoretical distant
Yeah, it's a
possibility. It's
real
a
way.
real possibility.
Mhm.
And so if we're going to put nuclear reactors on military bases, we need to make sure that they won't endanger the public if that happens.
So that's the part that's fascinating to me because porcelain can't burn, right? I don't think it
Yep.
doesn't ever burn. And then the silica inside of it is, and that's the part I don't totally love. So let me ask you a question. The pellet, is it look like a pill we would take, or is it a lot? Maybe describe it.
Well, it's many levels to it. So triso first starts off as little kernels, and they're about the size of a poppy seed, about a
Okay.
millimeter across. They're really, really tiny,
Okay.
and that's what that little shell is. And then from there, you take graphite powder and you compress them together to form either a pebble or a pellet. So pellets are little cylinders. They're about this big. That's what the about the same configuration that traditional nuclear used. And
Okay.
then pebbles, which my company is going to use, and so is X Energy is another one. And there's been several research reactors that use this throughout the last few decades. Pebbles actually don't even need to be refueled because what happens is that they flow through the reactor from top to bottom, and they're dropped on the core from the top, and then they flow down, and then the used pebbles come out the bottom. And this means you never have to turn the reactor off to refuel it, and that's a big improvement from the way nuclear reactors have been
Got
done
to shut
before.
them down,
You
put it
have
in
to
the new
shut down.
rod.
Exactly. You got to shut them down and refuel them for a couple of months. And it's a big operation where you got to open the top and everything. And of course, you're also not producing power during that time. And
Yeah.
if you're in a remote community, that's really not a good option. Or if you're running a mine with them, that's not a good option either because it
Yeah.
means, oh, we're going to shut down for 3 months. If it's a planned shutdown, fine, but it's kind of inconvenient. So,
Let me recap. We can fuel them very easily.
mhm.
You can't have a nuclear accident because they're in porcelain pellets, if to make it simple, or something, a pebble, and that's not going to burn. The fuel is what you've told, and we're going to get into that second, accessible, and they're quickly built and assembled anywhere in the world. Is that a fair summary so far?
That's a great summary. Yep. Yeah.
So
You
this
can
is
see why I'm excited about it. Why
I'm
it's
with
a
you. I mean,
real.
why I was so excited to have you on. I'm going, this is going to change everything. So the next thing, I grew up with, the idea of where do you get uranium? Let's talk about where the uranium comes from and how you said something earlier, it's in abundance, and why is it in abundance and how do you get it?
Yeah, uranium is not rare. It is 1 part per million of basically everything outside. You can go into your backyard and there's uranium. Now, traditional mines don't set up going anywhere. They go where uranium is even more concentrated because that helps the economics of doing it. You go to places where it's like a few percent. You don't go part per million. You look for uranium ore. That's how we used to do it. But now we don't even have to actually dig into the ground. We can mine uranium from water. And we can do that in two ways. One is there's lots of startups and established companies, both, are setting up uranium mining in a lot of parts of Canada, some parts of the U.S., other countries, where they don't even open the ground. They drill into the ground and they put water in. They pump water underground and they filter out the uranium and then put the water back. And the funny thing is, this doesn't make the water radioactive. It actually makes it less
Oh, that's
radioactive.
very active.
So it doesn't pose an environmental problem. And it has almost no impact on the surface. It's really amazing to see these places. There's also extremely cheap to run these operations. It's usually about two operators for several acres, for hundreds of acres of these fields where they're doing this, because all you need is one guy to basically sit and watch over things, and another guy to go and check and do maintenance on any of the pumps that are out there. And I encourage people to take a look at pictures of what some of these places look like, because for the most part, you'll barely notice that anything's even happening. So
Amazing.
it looks like a big open field. So it doesn't interfere with nature or future development of that land or anything. So it's not like open pit mining. And part of the reason that you can do this with uranium is because the amount of energy you get per ton of uranium is is about 1 million times of what you get per ton of coal. So it's just energy density is so high that it's significantly less impact on the world and significantly less cost to get it out of the ground.
Well, and just think of the crisis. I opened up the podcast here about oil and this problem for the world and inflation. You could effectively, now I know we need oil for byproducts, lubricants, so on, oils. I get it, synthetics.
Yeah.
but certainly it takes all the pressure off the idea of using oil from a fuel source for cars or whatever the case may be, because you'll then have that much more electrical power that, makes an electrical car that much more feasible if we ever get there. So, I mean,
Yeah,
the implications are incredible. And you actually said something that's, for me personally, it's exciting. What if a remote, I don't know, maybe country or village in Africa now wants power? They can get power in a way that they never deemed it before. It's incredible to think of it in that context.
absolutely. What if you live on an island and you don't have a
Right.
you're never going to have a population big enough for one of these giant reactors, or you don't have the space for it or something. Now you can get one of these smaller ones and power it, and that's going to really boost economies all over. Once you have power, you can start companies,
Yeah.
you can build a
It
data
makes the
center
whole world
anywhere
accessible.
you want.
The whole land you want. What's getting in the way? What is it about the policymakers or the public that is just misunderstood?
I think the public is actually really pro-nuclear right now, so I'm pretty excited about it.
It's green.
Obviously, it
It's
can be
green.
more pro-nuclear, but
Yeah.
it's nuclear's over 50% popularity, and in certain places, it's in the high 70s or 80s, so it's very popular. I think the thing that's getting in the way more than anything else is really just the high capex of building any kind of nuclear reactor. Even small ones have high capex, and that's just because nuclear is so good at generating power that it makes the most sense to build it big enough to do it. So when I say small modular reactors fitting on trucks, what we don't have is nuclear power plants that fit in the backyard of your own house. Maybe
Yeah.
we'll have that someday, but
I was
that's
gonna say that's not, I mean, if it's just a matter of scale, right? Who knows where this
yeah.
thing goes?
And part of the reason we can't do that is because there's certain parts about nuclear that really require sort of a fixed cost to them.
Yeah.
So they do have to have certain safeguards against nuclear proliferation, meaning they have to have guards that guard it. It has to be under the control of the country that's operating it. There has to be certain safety requirements, even with these new features, to make sure that it's not taken care of or something. So that is like a fixed cost to any kind of power system, and it's like a diesel doesn't have this issue. Like you can go to the hardware store and you can buy a diesel generator for your house,
Yeah.
that's a few kilowatts. It
Turn
scales
around.
down very well. Nuclear does not scale down to zero with the same ease, mainly because of the things I mentioned, proliferation issues and things like that.
Well, I
So
mean, is it not, I'm so assuming you probably know a little bit about this, but I spent a little time learning about solid state lithium batteries, which
mhm.
could be charged in fraction of the time, 5 to 10 minutes, and
Yeah,
less double. So you put a solid state lithium battery on the side of your house when they're ready, if they ever come, and they're close, and you power it with nuclear. You've just changed the whole energy dynamic everywhere. I mean, and
yeah,
it's pretty
absolutely.
exciting. Now that I know the government had an experiment where they took the parts of a nuclear reactor, lifted it on a helicopter, flew it from one state, I think it's Arizona to Texas, and then
Yeah,
reassembled
the
it.
C-130. Yeah.
And it worked out pretty well from what I understand. Yeah, is that am I getting that right?
Yeah, a little bit. So that reactor hadn't been turned on yet, and it hasn't been turned on since. But
Okay.
that was the company Valor Atomics, also here in LA. So I know that company well. I've met the CEO Isaiah, great guy. I thought that was a really cool stunt. I loved it. Yeah.
But
So
it got in the public's eye. I heard about it, right? I read
yeah,
about it.
yeah. That's and Isaiah's great at that. He's really good.
Rising tides
But
raise
it
all
did
boats, buddy.
demonstrate something really important for all of us, not just them. It showed it something for nuclear in general, which is it changed how people thought about what nuclear can do, and that was a great way to show that thing I talked about, that it could fit on the back of a truck. It showed, look, this can be small, this can be moved from one place to the other, it can be set up, and you can do that. And
Yeah. Well, this thing's also they do a lot more than just electricity, right? We can create fuels out of this, also heat. What do you do with
that's right.
heat? How should we look at this? As just electricity for our lights in our house, or is it much more than that?
Yeah, I think the best way to talk about that is I got to tell you a little bit about my company, the Earthineering Company.
Finally, we're gonna get
Yeah.
there. Listen, I know you're a smart guy, but I want you to give yourself a little props here. Come on.
Yeah,
What is
so
the company?
I
What's
founded
the
the
company?
Earthineering Company, and we're focused on making nuclear for heat. It's the technical term is process heat, but that's just because it means using heat to power some process, some chemical process. And we're fixated on a few chemical processes that get our attention because they have very immediate need. And but it generally, all chemical processes can be powered by this someday. So as we grow, we want to go into that area. We're not the only company to be looking into this. X Energy is also looking into this, but there's a reason why we're both pebble bed reactor companies. Pebbles are able to get even hotter than traditional pellets. So a pebble bed reactor can get hotter. And if you can get hotter, it means you can drive more interesting chemical reactions, not just the old way is just boiling water and driving a turbine. That's all
Right, right.
nuclear was used. But nuclear has the ability to go to any design temperature. And when you have TRISO, you can actually go to significantly higher temperatures than you used to because the fuel can't melt down. So you can safely run it at a high temperature. And when you run at a high temperature, one of the interesting things you can do is you can convert biomass like plants into hydrocarbons. You can basically power the same
Wow.
process that made hydrocarbons in underground.
Yeah.
Instead of geology covering up plants from the dinosaur age or whatever, millions of years ago, that used a lot of time and heat and pressure. But if you can make enough heat, you can do it in just a few minutes. It's hotter than it's
So wait,
underground,
hang on, time
but
out.
you can do it
Are
in
you
a few
saying we
minutes.
could make oil?
We can make oil. Yes. Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yes.
I mean, you're making diamonds now with heat, right? And I
That's
guess
right. You can do a
something
lot of
similar
things. Yeah, yeah. You
can
can
make
make
oil.
oil with heat. That's right.
Oh my God. So what else can you make?
You can process mining tailings to make critical minerals to generate
Okay.
to produce critical minerals. You can drive all kinds of chemical processes that are like companies like Dow use to make
Is
things
it
like
sort of
hemp and stuff
almost
like
like an
that.
endless source of any varying heat?
Yeah,
Multiple thousand.
exactly. Yeah. And right now we use hydrocarbons for that. That's actually what most hydrocarbons are used for. A lot of people think they're used for transportation, for airplanes and for cars, and a lot of it is, but quite a
Distillation of
lot
oil.
of it is used for driving chemical reactions.
That's
Most people
good.
don't even know about it because it's out of sight, out of mind. You go to the store, you buy your shampoo, and it's fine.
Yeah.
Uh,
Distillation of oil. How do you make oil into something else or natural gas for that matter? You need heat.
yeah,
Wow.
that's right.
You're basically a chef, buddy. Okay, I'm gonna cook. You're the cook. I'm a different kind of
Yeah.
cook, but well, I mean,
But I
so
think
far,
the other exciting thing that you could do with heat, and this is what's really gotten our attention recently. This was secretly our plan all along, but we didn't realize there'd be this much investment interest so early on. And we're finally seeing it. And that's you can also use heat to melt moon dust or lunar regolith, it's called. You can melt moon dust. And when you melt moon dust, you can make bricks, you can extract hydrogen, you can extract oxygen. You can get very rare things on the surface of the Earth that are almost non-existent on the surface of the Earth, like iridium and helium-3. But you can also get things that are on the surface of the Earth, but are rare enough that you have to do quite a lot of mining to get, like critical minerals on the moon also. And what's interesting about the moon is that it costs a lot of money to get there. So if you want a shovel on the moon, it's a very expensive shovel. But what it does not cost a lot to do is to bring things back because it's basically falling. It takes
yeah.
almost no energy to get back. And so mining on the moon is not that crazy as long as you have a good enough shovel. And that is why a nuclear reactor is the best kind of shovel. That's why you need that up there. You need that thing to be light and go up to space and not to be a huge payload and to be able to produce thousands of times its mass in the things you bring back.
Well, that's fascinating. Not only can we make oil, now we go to the moon and make synthetics and minerals and bricks. I mean,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
we're going to
And
populate the moon. I
it's
mean, that's a real. And you heard, I mean, the government just came out a week ago, so they want to populate the moon. I mean, that's a
That's
real
right.
thing.
That's right. And this is a big reason why we're making this public now, is because we're seeing that finally the outside world, the government and investors are really excited about going to the moon. And it's after Artemis 2 sent astronauts around the moon again, there's very little doubt that we're going back now. There was before that, I was always worried. NASA is just like the big projects we talked about, where they could get canceled, they could get delayed, there could be
Yeah.
there could be an accident, and then people get scared off from doing it. But it's really clear now. We're going back for sure. We're going to build a moon base, and that moon base needs something more than anything else, and that's energy. And
So
that
I don't know. I
energy
don't
has
know if
got to come from nuclear.
do you think we really went in the first place? I don't know. I'm
I
still,
personally do, but
I hope we
I have
did.
I have some friends who are very skeptical. So,
I mean, if they heard the astronauts talk about, well, we did things for the first time, like, wait, you went there and did this already. Why are you saying it's the first time? So, okay. But
well, look, there's only one way to find out for sure, and what I hope is,
we find the flag.
if is that someday my grandkids or maybe my kids, hopefully even me, I don't know, but
Maybe.
we go to the Apollo 11 landing site, and if we really went, there will be red velvet out in space, and you can go by. I'm sure they'll be really careful to make sure we don't go mess it up, but there will be a site there, and we'll even find out for ourselves. It's like we go to the Sea of Tranquility, it's either there or it isn't.
Okay.
So to
You know,
me, I love that people are worried that we didn't go, because I think that's the best challenge to go back.
curiosity. Let's go
Yeah,
find the flag.
let's
So
go
it
see
sounds
if
like
this is real. Yeah.
there's a lot more to this than just electricity for our homes. It's power, it's defense, it's fuel, really, right? And I mean, it's energy security, certainly, but how does this impact the defense and overall aviation? I mean, can't you, in theory, have a fuel source on a plane that would you fly a plane for a lot longer than we fly today? I guess. I don't know. I'm not making
Well,
sense. But
currently our plan isn't to make nuclear powered planes, although that was experimented on in the 60s. They made nuclear powered planes. The
wow.
reason that we're not aiming for that, and I think the government's not going to aim for that, is just because having that fuel up in the airplane poses too much of a risk
Yeah,
for
yeah,
something
yeah.
gone wrong.
Yeah.
But nuclear powered flight is definitely possible if you make the fuel on the ground and then fuel the plane with it. And I think this is how all air travel is going to be in the next 20 to 40 years. We're gonna stop getting fuel from hydrocarbons. One issue is we're running out. I mean,
Yeah.
the Earth's crust just doesn't have that much, and we want to fly more, not less. So we need to get that new jet fuel from somewhere. So I think all air travel will be powered by that very soon. But it's important for national defense, also for national security. It's really important because when we look at modern conflicts, we see, both our adversaries and us. We both run into this problem where if you cut off fuel from your troops, they can't do anything. That's just the case. You can see this on the modern battlefield right now. You can see this with the Strait of Hormuz causing problems for not so much for us, but for our allies who get their fuel from there. So, cutting off fuel is a big part of how modern warfare works. And that means we're at risk also. If we get into a conflict with a near peer, I won't name names, but let's say we get into a conflict with a near peer, one of the first things they're going to do is try and stop us from fueling our troops or our carrier groups in a way to do anything about it, because the United States in particular is very dependent on things like jet fuel for getting things done. We're fantastic at air superiority, but if we can't fuel the planes, we don't have air superiority.
Yeah, of course not.
And even nuclear powered aircraft carriers don't power their jets with that power. They need fuel. They have to be refueled. A lot of people don't know that, but a carrier group actually has to be refueled every 2 or 3 days in order to power those jets that take off from
That's a
it.
lot of fuel. That's a
Yeah.
lot of fuel, right? So then it sounds to me like not only is it a win for us from hydrocarbons, right? We use those hydrocarbons, the cheaper, more accessible power, certainly defense. And in this world of SpaceX going public at 1.7 trillion, it's got a major component about space. So in your mind, with all these levers you can pull, is it the investment in space that's most exciting for you and your company? Or is it all of these things? Like, what do you kind of pin the tail on a donkey here to say the most exciting thing about it is, what?
I'm actually excited about both. I really am. Of course, going to the moon is exciting. Absolutely. It's extremely exciting. It's almost so exciting that I dreamed about that kind of thing as a kid so much that I also almost got good at suppressing those feelings a little bit. Like, don't geek out too much, or you might alienate yourself. But I think going to the moon is exciting, and even going to Mars is exciting. I think the possibilities and the things that we'll develop and invent, and the things we'll learn from doing that are unimaginably huge for
Wow.
humanity. I think they have so much benefit. But at the same time, if we're going to get there, we need to get rocket fuel from somewhere, and there just isn't enough of it underground. There just aren't, the reserves aren't that big. We
Yeah.
can't power, Elon gets a million or $1 trillion bonus if he gets 1 million people to Mars, I think, right? If you're going to send 1 million people to Mars, you need rocket fuel.
Power.
It's
You're right.
and there isn't that much rocket fuel there. So I'm all in favor of sending 1 million people to Mars, but I want that power to come from someplace that doesn't destroy everything around us while we're doing it.
Yeah.
And that fuel has got to come from somewhere, and it just can't come from underground. Like you
I'll
said,
let you go.
hydrocarbons are used to make a lot of important things. And if we burn up all the hydrocarbons, we don't even have that hydrocarbon. We don't have that oil left to make things out of.
Yeah.
So we need to. That oil is valuable for a lot of other things too. It needs to be turned into things. It needs to turn into lubricants, things like that. So we can't just burn it all up. And we only have about 40 or 50 years left of it. And so if rocket launches, SpaceX success at going public shows that's a lot of rocket launches, and that's going to use a lot faster than 50 years. There's potential to grow.
Maybe you have to, and to your point, you're going to make oil with your be able to control temperature or make rocket fuel. And that's what I mean, I'm just making it oversimplifying it, of course, but certainly that's exciting. So what stands in the way? What stands in the way from where we are today with still the mega big plant that's trying to be built or maybe being built to this changing, and that we go from the one-off mega projects to a deployable modular nuclear reactor anywhere we need it that can do temperature or whatever the case may be.
Well, I think all the startups working on this are full steam ahead. So I don't actually see big barriers from the government or from public or even in the investment world. I don't see big barriers. Obviously, I think more investment makes it happen faster. So if people want to help out companies like mine, I strongly encourage that, obviously, or any of the other startups, or even some of the established players who also have new reactors. Westinghouse has a new reactor that's still on the big side, but it those stocks should be rewarded for this because they are going to make money off of it. We're all going to make money off it. Now, obviously, when it comes to startups, not all startups succeed. There might be things about them that cause them not to succeed, but I definitely think the industry is going to succeed. I'm like 99.9% confident that the industry
You're a
is
smart
going
guy.
to.
If you're that confident, we should all be that confident. So you've had some
And a
exciting.
big deadline we're looking up as July 4th of this year. They're supposed to President Trump signed an executive order challenging the startup world to get 4 new small modular reactors of any size to be started by July 4th of 2026 in honor of America's birthday. And
Wow,
we'll see how that contest goes.
that's pretty
I
cool.
maybe not all of them will succeed. Maybe some won't. Valor Atomics, the one you mentioned, is one of those companies. They're trying to get that reactor that was delivered by aircraft running by July 4th. And that's also unprecedentedly fast. That was a great challenge. That's what we need. You look at how fast Apollo was, assuming it happened,
Assuming it happened. I'm going to go with it happen. I'm going to go
yeah.
with it.
But from the time that Kennedy challenged the world to do it to the time it happened was incredibly fast. And that's one of the things we've lost, that we need to get back. And I'm really excited that we're getting that back with nuclear. That needs to be there needs to be a sense of urgency. That's why going to the moon is actually so important for nuclear as well as on Earth. Is when I say timelines like we're going to run out of oil in 40 years, one of the downsides is sometimes a lot of investors and the public don't see that as urgent. They're like, oh, okay, then we can wait. The downside of that is, of course, it takes time to replace it. It takes almost 20 years to replace oil. So you don't want to just you go to the gas pump and then one day it's like, sorry, we're out. That's not a great way.
Listen, we got to get this podcast in front of Elon Musk. I'm sure he knows a lot about this stuff, but if he heard you how excited you are about some of these things, I bet you probably got a fun phone call from him saying, how much money do you need? I would guess.
Yeah.
And speaking about money, you've had some exciting news at your company. What's happened recently that's showing interest in what you're doing?
Yeah, so the 2 big news stories are, one, I told you already that we are going to the moon. We haven't been
I
public
like
with
that.
that at all. In fact, you go to our website, it doesn't even mention that yet. And the other big news is that we joined Capital Factory as an all access portfolio company. And that's a really great honor. So we're really excited about that. Capital Factory has an amazing portfolio. We joined other nuclear companies like Allo, TriAlpha, and Deep Fission, all three great nuclear companies. So I'm really excited to be in that group now. And they also have unprecedented access to the U.S. Military and to members of the government and to really big investors. I don't think Elon is on their Rolodex, but a lot of other great people are so on that scale. So that's although Elon's in Austin, so I don't know why. Maybe he is. I don't know.
We work very close with a very large investor named Ron Barron. I'm going to make sure he listens to this, and don't be surprised if he connects you to. They're good friends.
All right,
Let's wrap
fantastic.
this all up. This has been exciting. Your company's getting an influx of money. You're obviously, and by the way, just to be clear, not only is he a brilliant guy, but president and CEO of Earthiering Company. You can look him up. They're out there. And what I think is, most fun about this today, Kevin, is I think we've opened the eyes of thousands of people who grew up like me, 3 Mile Island and all the other things we talked about, and suddenly everything is different. How would you wrap us up today? What do you want to leave people with? What do you want people to think about as they listen to the end of this podcast?
Well, I think the most important things are that the nuclear renaissance is here. It's starting. It's only going to get more exciting. Uh, Abundant, cheap energy is going to be a big part of the next several decades. And the space race is back, and we're going to stay on the moon. And those are the two most exciting things, I think. And they're both of them are going to mean uh, better standard of living, wealth and abundance for America and for the world. And I think it's really exciting to be alive at a time right now. And of course, I would like people to try and connect with me online. You can contact me. Kevin Hickerson on LinkedIn or KP Hickerson on X, or the Earthineering Company on LinkedIn or X. Follow us, get updates. You can sign up for our newsletter, and you can find out as we're joining this exciting ride, and I couldn't be happier about it.
Dude, it's awesome. And by the way, I think you said in standard of living, but climate change. A lot of people are worried about the climate, right? So suddenly you might be the catalyst to reverse this concern about, what we're doing to the environment. And
That's right. Yeah, I didn't bring it up because it's really been brought up a lot
a
on
lot, yeah.
in the past. And sometimes people are a little worried about it, but the fact is, carbon neutral fuel is the only solution to climate change, in my opinion. We can't
Exactly.
electrify everything. I've looked down that road. We need things to
Not
replace
wind,
fossil fuels.
it's not
Yeah,
wind turbines, it's not solar. They can't
that's
produce
right.
the power we need. They're too inefficient. They break. You're right. This is the way. All
That's
right,
right.
Kevin, this has been amazing. We're not done yet, though. This is the last piece of the podcast. We wrap this up for fun. Every week, I give a shout out. The shout out could be anybody in the world that you like. It could be your mother, your father, your friend, your buddy, your wife, whatever, or some political, whatever, someone that you think did something pretty cool in the last whatever number of days, weeks. Who, if you wanted someone to get a credit from you, who would it be? Anybody out
Shout out, really my kids keep me going, so I would
there?
like to give a shout out to my kids. My daughter Melanie, who's in school, give a shout out to her.
How old
My
is
son,
she?
she is 19.
God, you don't look like you could have a 19-year-old, by the way, but
Yeah.
that's wonderful. Where's she going to
Yeah,
school?
and my two sons, my two boys, Brian and Jack. Shout out to
Where?
them.
How,
Really, the main reason I'm doing this is for them more than anybody. Absolutely. So,
good for you. Good for
and
you.
hopefully I'll get some grandkids from them. I'm not that old yet, but it's
Well,
for
if
my
energy's cheap and the cost of living get normalized, maybe they'll want to have babies again.
yeah, right.
I have two daughters as well, so I'm in the same boat as you. It's 20
Uh,
and 21, so we talk a lot about that money. I'll give mine this week. I have two this week, and usually I just give one, but I'm going to give two this week. The first one's Jamie Dimon, and the reason why I mentioned Jamie Dimon, I think when we look around, the people who represent American capitalism, I just went to the new building they built in New York City. It's incredible. They got a flag on the inside of the building that moves because it's got wind on it, and the flag changes direction based on the wind outside.
oh,
But
that's awesome.
and the building itself is very efficient. It's built to this kind of modern way of thinking of open space and very warming for a gigantic building. But it's more. I think we look about people who steer the world and steer the U.S. economy, who lead capitalism. And I'm a capitalist. He's at the forefront. Some of the things he's done in
Me
the past
too, by
week.
the way. in case that wasn't clear. Me
What's
too,
that?
by the way, in case that wasn't clear.
Well, you have to be for what you do. So I'm gonna
Yeah,
give my first shout out to him. I just think I hope he never runs for political office because it would taint his legacy. And as he's getting to the end of his reign as probably the best banker in history, I think he's a guy I look up to and admire greatly. And the second one's a different one. The second one I'm going to give to you. And you know why I'm going to give it to you? Because you're doing some amazing things. And to have you join this podcast, we didn't have to. And the fact that you are, I think, you could change the way we live, buddy. I mean, I'm lucky. I get to make 1 and 1 = 3. I make people a bunch of money. I'm pretty good at it. But you're going to change lives. And for that, my friend, I can't applaud you more. I think you're an amazing guy. And thank you for joining me today.
thank you very much.
You're
Very
welcome.
humbled to hear that. Thank you.
Everybody, I hope you have a wonderful week. I'll join you next week with my older daughter, Luca, from Japan. And we'll have some fun talking about how she's going to start paying for her own stuff when she starts her job on July 8th. But besides that, a little bit about her background. I know many of you ask. And Kevin, I'm going to have you back because as you guys get going, once you have your next big thing or the first big thing or however you want to put it, you're going to come back and we're going to do this again. Is that all right?
That sounds great, and we'll have a lot more to be excited about. So,
Thank you for being
plenty
on,
to
buddy.
talk about in the future.
I'm sure. Thank you for being on, everybody. Thank you very much. Have a great day.